Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the UnWokable podcast. I'm your host, UnWokable. Hey, so I'm here to talk to you guys. I'm here to talk to you guys about Milo Yiannopoulos absolutely dominating an entire episode of Timcast IRL. Now, for those of you who may not know, I was recently a guest on Timcast IRL. It was a great time. Love those guys. But I want to talk to you about the dynamic here. As somebody who's been a guest on that show, I would say this: it's difficult, not unwarrantedly difficult, but difficult to get a word in edgewise because you have very experienced people like Tim and Luke who are used to dominating a conversation. They are used to dominating a conversation. They have a lot to say. They do this all the time. And there is it's an interesting dynamic. First of all, Tim is an extremely knowledgeable, intelligent person. And he runs that room without ne'er having to say a word. He decides what stories they go to and when. He decides the pacing. If he doesn't agree with what you're saying, he'll jump in. If he wants to add something, he jumps in. But ladies and gentlemen, that is not what happened when Milo Yiannopoulos was on this show. I think this is a very interesting case study in why Milo Yiannopoulos was taken off all social media. And he actually speaks to this. He speaks to this in the context of Trump. He lumps himself in there a little bit. But people like Milo. Now, let me just couch this real quick. Milo has some very on the fringes views of things. And he said some things that led to him being banned. But watching this episode and knowing what goes on behind the scenes, knowing what it's like sitting inside that room with Tim and Luke and Ian, showed me something, because Milo is an OG. Milo dominated Twitter before Tim, before James, before any of the people you're seeing dominate Twitter right now. He dominated Twitter before Jack Posobiec. He dominated Twitter before Trump, and he talks about that in this cast. And it goes to show, I think the reason why Milo was really banned is because Milo has the ability, as he equates to Trump in this interview, to dominate a conversation with both intellect and what he calls that X factor. So I think it's really, really important to note that when you talk about him being banned. And I think this appearance by him kind of shattered what is going on right now in terms of the accepted narrative when it comes to DeSantis versus Trump. And Tim is a professional fence sitter when it comes to some things. And I respect him. I love being on his show. It was an awesome time. We didn't talk about near the stuff that I thought we were going to talk about, but that's okay. But I want to give you some perspective of how actually impressive this was by Milo Yiannopoulos, because Tim, Luke, they couldn't get a word in edgewise. They couldn't get a word in edgewise, and he just held forth and schooled them on how to grab an audience, which is not something that they are unskilled at, right? And so I'm just going to jump in here. I'm going to make the screen bigger so you can see Milo and what's going on. So we can just talk about a little bit of the dynamic that happened here and the points that Milo made in terms of the Trump versus DeSantis narrative that's being just flooded by a giant cadre of influencers on Twitter. And as somebody who has been sometimes critical of the most accepted promoted influences on the right on Twitter. I thought he made some great points. Now, I want to couch this. I don't agree with everything that Milo says. I do agree with his right to say it. And I think that the establishment found in Milo a person that would be very, very difficult to run any other influencer up against. And I think this is a 2-hour long proof positive of that statement. So we're going to jump in here, and I'm gonna make this screen bigger so you can see it. And I'm just going to give you some insight. First of all, so let's understand. So Milo, where he's sitting right now, if you've never been on Timcast, which I imagine most of you haven't, I was lucky enough to go on. Tim is sitting directly across from Milo. Okay, they're looking straight at each other. Luke is on his left, on the same side of the table as him, and Ian is on the same side of the table as Tim, right? Just to Milo's left, so on Tim's right. And this setup is pretty interesting if you want to talk about how the show is run and how Tim moves things along in a very excellent professional way. But Tim runs that room with Nair having to say a word. He'll throw up his hand. Everybody knows, okay, it's Tim's time. He's going to jump in here. He's going to change the topic. He's going to change his story. Tim had a slate of stories he was going to go through for this episode. He always does. So just a little bit of insight here. When I got there, I was down in the green room, and I'm not going to give away anything, but it's fun. Everybody was around. We sat around. First of all, you're traveling all day if you're coming from out of town, so you haven't been able to get online and see what Tim's talking about. But Tim uses his Twitter as a curator, right? And that details and his own show for the day, right? His own show for the day. He goes through stories, and that's usually what he talks about on Timcast. But he also will bring up stuff that he tweets out on Twitter to determine what he's going to talk about on IRL that night. If you guys are around, comment in. Super chats are open, but you can jump in, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Don't lurk, comment. Makes me want to just know who's watching. But I think, and so Tim curates it, and then when he's in the room, you get about 10 or 15 minutes before the show. He's like, okay, what's going on? What are we going to talk about? Luke throws out something. The guest can throw out something. This is about 10 minutes before the show, right? And they're saying, okay, we're going to go through this. We're going to go through this story. We're going to go through this story. And, what do you have to say on it? They sometimes plan little bits like they did on the show I was on. And just funny things. And then you just go. It's done. And Tim takes the thumbnail for the show right before. You sit up, and he's like, all right, look at me. Take the picture up, and he throws the thumbnail up, and boom, you're off to the races. Pretty cool environment. But I say all that to say that Tim, as the host of the show, everybody's in a place where they can look at Tim. Everybody is following his lead. He can throw up his hand and grab the attention of everyone there. They know to be quiet. They know if they're talking about a point to sum it up and move forward, and he'll grab it and move the direction of the show. But Milo, and you'll see it at the first few minutes of this, just completely ignores it. And then continues to hold forth on this show like nobody I've ever seen. If you look at the comments for Tim's show on YouTube, you'll see that the main criticism of him is he talks too much and doesn't let the guests talk enough. Now, that's his show. I think Tim, does a good job. I think that he has made that show successful by keeping the topics moving and by hitting the points that he wants to hit in the way that he set it out. And that's made the show successful. But what Milo does here shows that he's an OG. He is the guy that laid the groundwork for Tim Pool. He's the guy who laid the groundwork for Jack Posobiec. He's the guy who laid the groundwork for a lot of the influencers you see now. And in this, he offers some, I think, just criticism of the way that some of these influencers operate. I'm not talking about Tim specifically, but I'm saying that it's okay. Milo says, I don't really like censoring myself. I'm being an influencer behind the scenes, which is, that he's dominated that area and doesn't really want to go back. And if he would, we'll go through that. And kind of criticizes some of the influencers you see now that seem to be parroting a narrative all in concert, in unison, especially when it comes to Trump v. DeSantis, which again, I like DeSantis. I think he is an awesome governor. I think he has every right to run. I think that he has some good things about him that would be safer bet than renominating Trump. But there is now a concerted effort by the influencers who have been shown to be working with the DeSantis campaign, at least in some capacity, to lay the groundwork to make Trump seem unelectable. And there's merit in that argument. But what bothers me about it is that they seem to be doing it using the same talking points as like the Lincoln Project. That makes me nervous. But I'm not going to, that's not the point here. I can do another thing on that. I want to talk about what Milo says and how he dominates this conversation and the good points, the good and bad points he makes. So we're going to go into that. Here we go. I'm going to back this up just a tear so you get the context of what he started talking about when when Tim kind of basically lost control of the show. It became the Milo show. So here we go. And we're off to the races.
Minds have been placed, and we're trying to make it to the other side to win this conflict. So
also, when you're trying to change a system structure, it's good to go right next door to the system and behave the way you want that system to become, and then it will bleed over into the new system.
Let's say that. Let's talk.
We'll agree to disagree on strategy.
We'll talk about that for the members only uncensored, where we can go really off. But let's jump into this first story, ladies and gentlemen. Last night, Republicans won, and then I wake up in the morning and all the conservatives are angry. They're saying that this was an unlosable election and we did so poorly. And I'm seeing all these leftist personalities.
I want to talk about this for just a second because I think this is a great point, is that we completely miffed the expectations game. We completely miffed it. It's like, oh, we're going to have this huge red wave. That was the message coming out of all of the influencers who end up turning the next day and complaining like Tim is talking about now. We miffed the expectations game. We miffed it. It's like you go in, you underpromise and overperform. That's the goal, right? You underpromise and overperform. So Tim is hitting on something here I think you should take note of, and Milo just takes it and runs with it.
Cheering and screaming like, oh, no red wave. And I'm just like, I don't understand. The Republicans won. Like they won. They won. And there's likely more winning coming. I get it. Republicans wanted a bloodbath, but instead they got a victory. So now this is great. Biden says he won't change anything after a successful night for Dems, does intend to run in 2024, and it will be fun watching Don v. Ron taunts press. Okay, he's not going to change anything. That's not the message that people wanted to hear. The message that people want to hear is things are going to get better, but things are bad. Well, and for a variety of reasons.
Just pointing out that Tim is laying the groundwork for where he wants the conversation to go. That's what he's doing right now. He's laying the groundwork for where he wants the conversation to go. And Milo basically ignores it. He's trying to make it the conversation about, Biden and what Biden's not going to do, while making the point that the conservatives basically had this huge expectation and then turned around the next day. Those same conservatives said, oh, we didn't make it. We're so disappointed. Laying the groundwork for the narrative that it's probably Trump's fault. But DeSantis did so well, so DeSantis is better than Trump. Now, I'm not talking about the merit of that. I'm just telling you what the groundwork here is, and Milo just ignores it.
Since people are willing to vote Democrat and a variety of really weird reasons, like they voted in the dead guy. But
I don't think people want. I think people used to be engaged in politics because they wanted to get a glimpse of a better world. But that's the washing powder version of politics. I think people are well into bitterness. I think people want to see the bad guys bleed. I think that people want to see the bloodbath that you're talking about comes not from a desire to reimagine the world in a better way, because I think people are losing hope in that. I think people want to see their antagonists suffer.
I agree. I agree.
And the reason for the Republican frustration is that they were expecting a rare moment of catharsis.
Why were they expecting it, though? That's the question. Why were they expecting it? They were expecting it because that's what all of the influencers and all of the media who turned around and started complaining about it told them to expect. How do I know? I'm on Twitter. I actually interact with these people. More so before I started criticizing them than I do now. But, you know, on this list that came out where Libs of TikTok was like #1 on this free speech list coming out of, I'm 469 out of 41,000. Okay. I've interacted with these people. I've had arguments with these people. I've agreed with these people. I've had open conversations with these people because I've been doing this for 2-3 years. And even though there's a little bit of an effort now to make me seem like I'm not as influential as I am, you know, I've went on Timcast for a reason. So I've been at this level. And one thing that Milo doesn't hit is that all the conservative influencers that Tim is talking about, all of them, were saying we're going to have this huge red wave. That's what they laid the expectation for. And then you turn around the next day, and when it doesn't happen to that extent, they go, oh, this is horrible. Look, Trump said, you know, called Ron DeSantis sanctimonious. It must be his fault. And then everything he says from that point on is Trump bad, DeSantis good, Trump bad, DeSantis good, Trump bad, DeSantis good. And again, they're using a lot of the same arguments as the Lincoln Project and some of the other Republicans from before. Now, again, I like DeSantis. I think in many ways DeSantis would be a better candidate. I'm just telling you what Milo's going to start hitting on here, and what Tim tried to lay the groundwork for the conversation that it ended up just getting taken over by Milo Yiannopoulos in a way that only someone like him at his level can do to a guy like Tim or a guy like Luke even.
Which is not granted often to people with right of center politics, a moment in which they could reassure themselves that sometimes justice is done, that the universe is capable of delivering a true justice where it is warranted, and they were robbed of that. So what was stolen from them was not some kind of washing powder commercial glimpse of a better future. What was stolen from them was revenge. Yeah. Because these people don't feel like they've been out of power, and that's a shame. They feel like they articulate their feelings now in very religious terms, and they talk about their enemies in terms of demons, devils, and Satan, and the way in which they express themselves.
Both sides do this.
You know, and the I think the sunk emotional cost that they had attached to the midterms as a moment when they could reassure themselves that.
But again, why did they attach that? Because the influencers on Twitter who are now just railing about how bad it was and pushing DeSantis because they're blaming Trump for it, which again, there may be merit. I think there's some merit to that, but I don't think it's to the extent. You have a lot of people who are committed to DeSantis over Trump, and they expected that because that's what the rank and file on Twitter and other places were expecting, the red wave, because that's what everybody was telling them was going to happen.
Maybe there was, maybe there was still some glimmer of.
But they won.
Well, not really.
But they won what they needed. The House.
No, they
what could they have done better? What could they have done?
It was a bog standard or slightly unimpressive midterm in which the usual swing occurred. That is not what Republicans were expecting.
Right.
They wanted not what they were hoping
victory,
for. That's not a victory. When something happens that always happens, that happens whether you campaign or not, that happens whether you do anything or not, that's not a victory. That's people perceive that as a kind of as a sort of
Go ahead and
almost
comment
like a
in,
weather
guys.
event,
You
you know,
have questions
it's just
about-
part of the natural cycle of things.
Yeah.
There was no victory because there was nothing above and beyond what the ordinary course of a midterm election.
I understand what you're saying, that they needed something that proved something symbolic and something of meaning.
They just wanted the people who they feel are tearing the fabric of their civilization apart, doing all kinds of things that we'll talk about in the to suffer. They wanted to see
2016.
they wanted to see the I forget what the Conan quote is. I haven't seen it for 25 years, but you know, they wanted that. Whatever the first bit is, the lamentations of their women. They wanted shrieking. They wanted the 2016 energy.
Right.
They wanted to see liberals,
and that's what they were expecting.
That's nebulous in the sense that by taking
it's atavistic.
No. Look,
it's atavistic.
Right.
It's
But
okay, so now see what's happening here. This is what doesn't happen most of the time on Timcast IRL. This is where the conflict starts. Tim is used to holding the floor. He's the most dominant person in the room 99.9% of the time. He owns that company. You can see it when he walks in the room, whether you're in the green room, whether you're in the actual room. That the show is taped in or streamed from. He is the most dominant person there. And Milo could give a crap about him. Milo, although he is on this guy's show, Milo was Tim before Tim was. Milo set this tone and the stage for guys like Tim. And I love Tim. I think he does great work. I mean, he's obviously a very successful person. And his show has a lot of good people on it. But when Tim, 99.9% of the time, when Tim wants that microphone, the guest will acquiesce to him. And he takes over and projects the message from the conversation that he most wishes it to be. Milo, as you'll see in this situation, absolutely has none of that. He's like, no, I'm not gonna let you do that. So this is where the conflict begins, and where Tim eventually just relents and lets Milo go. And I think that he speaks to this later on. You know, Milo hasn't been on anywhere in 5 years. I want to let him talk, but it's not for a lack of trying by Tim or Luke. Luke actually gets more words in edgewise than Tim does here, which is really interesting. But Milo lets nobody get one over on him at all.
Right.
They wanted to see liberals panic.
But that's nebulous in the sense that by taking
it's atavistic.
No. Look,
it's atavistic.
Right.
It's
But
fundamental.
Listen. By winning the House, there can now be inquiries, investigations.
Nobody cares about winning the House.
Right. So listen.
You see, Tim's used to at that moment letting his points stand and letting him be able to finish his sentence. And Milo doesn't. As soon as he clips something that he doesn't agree with, he just starts talking over him. Which is just watch another episode of Timcast with even a well-known person like Jack Prosovic. Tim still dominates that conversation. It's at very least a 60-40 Tim, everyone else. Milo has none of it.
Nobody cares about winning the House. The entire Republican base is now
for
at peace
them
with the
to
fact
get
that elections are
the
theater.
Retribution, for them to feel the satisfaction is simply their choice. They got what they could get. Now, I suppose they wanted to see a tremendous landslide victory.
They didn't get what they could
which
get.
wouldn't have changed anything procedurally. It would have felt good.
No.
Well, I would just
they didn't get what they could get.
And Luke tries to jump in. Luke is the color man. Luke is real smart and he's used to doing this. And that's what they'll do. They'll ping pong off of a point, right? But Milo just, boom, I'm not taking any. I'm going to take the point I'm not going to let you run over the point you tried to make that was wrong or that he disagrees with. I'm going to lay your point out and say why you were wrong. I'm going to keep it at that main point.
Intuit that they were robbed of this victory by people who should have had their backs.
But what's the victory? What does victory look like?
They wanted to see their own enemies humiliated.
Right.
And they didn't.
And the only reason they're not being humiliated is because Republicans are acting like they lost.
No. What happened in this election was
Republicans are acting
not only
like
were the leaders in the Republican Party removing spending from some of the most inspirational and popular candidates.
Oh, listen to this.
Because
this is a huge point that none of the DeSantis won Trump causes us to lose crowd is saying right now. And it's absolutely true. I looked into it myself. Listen to this. Listen to what he says.
Republicans are acting like they lost.
No. What happened in this election was not only were the leaders in the Republican Party removing spending from some of the most inspirational and popular candidates, which itself is a form of demoralization, and sabotaging some of the candidates that had the most promise for upsets, those little things that give you a burst of joy, and a burst of joy in an otherwise, I mean, you know, it would have been nice if he'd won, but what they correctly intuited is that this was another example of the powers that be in the Republican Party leaving money on the table, actively sabotaging the candidates that the base likes most because they hate them. And they are right about that. That's what happened. The powers that be in the Republican.
And what influencers are now trying to do, guys, is take that dissatisfaction and point it at Trump. What makes me nervous about it is I see people that I like and I've followed for a long time parroting the same talking points coming out of MSNBC and people from the Lincoln Project or people from other areas of, you know, the center left or left storm, you know, whether it's Barry Weiss or on her recent podcast, they're all saying DeSantis good, Trump bad. And I think they're doing that out of a sense of real concern that Trump can't win a general election. But they're taking a result that came from what Milo was talking about, that the Republican Party literally abandoned. I saw this happen in a race here in my own district for a state house. The Republicans completely abandoned the person running for the state house in my district because she maybe have waffled on a couple of things that they thought should be the core of what the Republican message is. And she went a little bit more towards the MAGA side of things or the Trump side of things, in not even full out, just hinted towards it, and boom, man, they weren't there for her. And I saw that in lots of different places. What Milo is saying here, he's taking the dissatisfaction point and he's bringing it out and putting it where it belongs, which is the establishment Republican Party that abandoned candidates that were nominated that they didn't like, which if they would have fully supported them, we might have had a different outcome.
Party sabotaged some of the candidates that were the most popular with the base and changed the result of some of those elections through removing millions of dollars in spending. So the Republicans are acting out not because they're babies who are choosing to be losers. They're acting out because they were wronged and they know it.
Sure. But I don't think that explains Ben Shapiro, for instance.
Nothing explains Ben Shapiro.
Well, look, you look at the Daily Wire guys and they're upset.
Now, keep in mind that Tim works closely with the Daily Wire. Okay. And Ben Shapiro is definitely a DeSantis over Trump guy. And so is Matt Walsh. And so is Andrew Klavan. Michael Knowles is a little bit more on the fence, but these guys have vastly committed to the thought that DeSantis should be the nominee over Trump. And Ben Shapiro in their cast that evening was very much laying the groundwork of this is a very disappointing outcome and we need to look at why. So just keep that in mind.
About the results. They're saying, you know,
they've never had a moment of contentment in their lives.
So perhaps that's it. They weren't going to be satisfied no matter what happened.
Well, they won't. All sorts of things.
Well, just really quickly, I really wanted to butt in and make a point
I'll put it like
here.
this: they won't be happy until a quite different flag is flying over the White House.
Yeah, but the midterm elections are usually a referendum on the president's
term. Oh, here we go. Look at
I think there's a reason why Biden is coming out right now and saying, I'm going to keep doing what I usually do. But they historically politically are. And if we look at previous midterms, like in 2010 and 2014, the Republicans overwhelmingly won by huge numbers. They didn't do that.
See, that is the message right now. That's the message right now. What Luke just said, that's the message that everybody's pointing out, is that we lost and there's a reason for it. And the reason for it is that Trump picked candidates that people didn't like. Now, I did a video earlier, a few days ago, on the fact that I think that was the case, at least in one aspect, which was Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania. if Trump would have not endorsed Kathy Barnett, I think it'd have been a completely different race. Completely different race.
This time, the Senate again is still undecided.
And these results don't match how people feel about Biden. They don't. Now, there are candidates that are weird special cases, like Fetterman, who has inspired sympathy.
Oh, and that's so true.
He's just, I can't help but sort of like the guy. It just brings out, kind of a warm feeling. I just kind of want to see him succeed because I see him struggling. And
I see a Fetterman Biden ticket.
Normal response to seeing somebody struggling is to want to help them. Like I watched that debate and I wanted to vote for the guy. That what people are seeing is results that are out of step with how they know people feel about this presidency. And the reason those results are out of step is the Republican leadership.
Do you think
who didn't just sit by and say, let's just let what happens happen. They actively sabotaged the chances of some of the most popular, populist, nationalist, Trump adjacent characters. It is, and voters are a little bit better informed and a little bit more intelligent, I think, than the Washington people give them credit for. They have correctly intuited betrayal. They are not upset because the results were, they didn't get enough seats. They are justly incensed and indignant because they know that they have been betrayed by the people they pay to have their backs.
Okay, and right here, hold on. The people they pay to have their backs are now trying to point that betrayal towards Trump after they abandoned many of the candidates that Trump supported because Trump supported them. And again, just want to point this out. I'm not a Trump over DeSantis guy. The way I'm at right now is like, let them fight it out. And let them figure out, let the people figure out what they want in terms of each candidate without necessarily a whole band of the people that have now, the influencers and the news media people, the new right news media people who everybody has grown to trust, just trumpeting DeSantis as if he can do no wrong, as if he is the paragon of all things good and true, and Trump is the reason we lost the midterms. I don't think objectively that's true. And I think that's what Milo says here. Nobody can deny that DeSantis just dominated and did so from a quality message, a message I agree with. Right? But Trump helped. I didn't see DeSantis stumping around the country for anybody like Trump was. I didn't see DeSantis out there shilling or endorsing a bunch of candidates to the level that Trump was. So it's just something to think about.
Think that the Republican Party should split in half or split apart?
I think the country should split in half.
Oh, here we go.
I'm very much in favor.
I don't agree with Milo there.
The Republican Party is an entity that survives despite failing to understand how to talk like human beings, how to talk to human beings, and how to reflect the concerns of the voters who, out of the indefatigability of the human spirit, keep hoping for the best and voting for them anyway. The party is not fit for purpose, and if it doesn't reinvent itself in Trump's image, it doesn't deserve to live.
Trump or Ron DeSantis? That's going to be the big debate here.
Now here we go.
I don't think anybody is seriously in favor of DeSantis unless they're paid to be.
I strongly disagree with you on that. But that's going to be a topic we're going to be discussing here in a little bit.
If you're on Meghan McCain's side,
that right there is the bomb that Milo can drop that nobody else will drop, because anybody who feels that way on Twitter right now, I'm telling you right now, anybody who feels that way is not in the upper echelon of influencers. And the upper echelon of influencers are all saying the same thing, like in concert. And so I'm just going to rewind that so you can listen. That is what Milo says here is very much, there's a lot of evidence to show that that's true.
Is seriously in favor of DeSantis unless they're paid to be. I think it doesn't deserve to live.
Trump or Ron DeSantis? That's going to be the big debate here as well.
I don't think anybody is seriously in favor of DeSantis unless they're paid to be.
I strongly disagree with you on that. But that's going to be a topic we're going to be discussing here in a little bit.
If you're on Meghan McCain's side, you're on the wrong side.
Oh my gosh. And see, this is why Milo Yiannopoulos, I firmly believe this, is not allowed on the internet. Because Luke is a really intelligent guy. Luke does this all the time. Luke is obviously has an opinion here that is direct opposite of what Milo's is. And Milo just has none of it and just shuts him down. I mean, just shuts him down. And I've been in that room, guys. I know what it's like to try to make a point that might gear towards him. They'll talk over you, and they have control of the room. Tim has control of that room, but Tim lost control of that room 3 minutes ago. This is Milo's room now. This is Milo's show for the remaining 2 hours of this.
I don't think I'm on Meghan McCain's side at all. But more importantly here, there is something to say about this performance in the face of economic inflation, lockdowns, crime waves, which seems like it wasn't really affecting the election results. There's also the fact that a lot of Trump-endorsed candidates didn't win. Trump's attacking some of them right now. And the ones that he did,
Trumpian candidates.
and then the ones he attacked won.
There are some examples of that. The problem here, I felt a bit icky seeing Trump whine about the consultants. It didn't seem like a kind of alpha dog daddy thing that we're used to from Trump. Seemed a little bit pathetic. And my hope is that he will announce soon and get his mojo back, because at the same time as he's taking these very light touch, teasing pot shots at DeSantis, who has zero chance of succeeding. Look, DeSantis is almost as popular as Trump in some bits of Florida, but don't ask them to choose, because he is gone the second they have to choose between him and Trump. Don't get it twisted, okay?
Milo lives in Florida, by the way, for the record, so for y'all don't know. Milo lives in Florida, and so what he's saying right now is DeSantis is popular, but if they have to choose, DeSantis is going to lose.
He has no chance. It is not happening.
But you think even in Miami and Tampa, Trump wasn't able to flip those districts.
You're out.
See again here. It's like they're ping ponging. Timcast works very closely with the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire is a pro DeSantis group over Trump. That's just what it is. You can, I like the Daily Wire. I like those guys. They have great analysis. I love the shows. But this started the day before the elections, and I did a little video about it where, Trump says Ron DeSanctimonious, and Matt Walsh starts crying like a baby. Right? And they were laying a little bit of groundwork for what I think these very smart people at the Daily Wire knew was probably going to happen on Tuesday, despite the fact that they were insisting that there was going to be a giant red wave. And Tim and Luke here are both making the points of what the majority of influencers are saying on Twitter right now, which is Trump is unelectable, DeSantis is the guy. That's it. Trump is unelectable, DeSantis is the guy. Trump is unelectable, DeSantis is the guy. DeSantis is Trump without all of the baggage, is the message. And Trump saying critical things of DeSantis or the people that are gathering around him Yeah, Lloyd Brown. Yes, Milo was talking about other politicians and media pushing DeSantis. I don't know. How did Luke miss it, Lloyd? How did Luke miss it? He wanted to. Because they're very much trying right now. I think Milo being on the show was really an attempt to say, okay, here's this crazy guy that really loves Trump, and we're the nice, non-crazy people, which is very much the narrative that's going on right now. It's even happening to me here at home in Oklahoma. It's like, that guy's crazy. We're the ones doing the work. It happens all the time. And it's usually done behind the scenes. And then when you respond out in public, it's like, look how crazy that guy is. He's just trying to divide everything. But what people don't know, I have people I talk to in Florida who are actually close to Milo and actually close to Trump that are saying that DeSantis has been laying groundworks attacking him behind the scenes for months and months and months. And Trump is finally starting to respond to some of that. So, again, I like Ron DeSantis. I think that he is a very strong candidate. And I don't agree with everything Milo says here, but the point is that he's offering a perspective that needs to be taken into account, unless you're just a paid shill or unless you have some personal influence to gain from just following with the major crowd. Right? Just following with the major crowd. Do you have some? Because that's what I see a lot now. Is okay, well, this is what the major crowd is. This is what my governor's doing. This is what, most of the influencers on Twitter are doing. If I just jump into the stream, I'm going to become a bigger part of the stream. So I challenge people. Just take into account the last time that happened, guys, was COVID. The last time that happened was 2020 when everybody was going against Trump. I get very nervous when everybody starts singing the same tune in concert as if it was some kind of organic response when it's obviously not organic. If it's obviously not organic.
Mind if you think that somebody with the charisma of a potted cactus can go up against Donald Trump and not end as just another casualty on the list. You are out of your mind. And looking at the rogues gallery of people who are being paid to support DeSantis, I think unless you can provide a compelling case, which today I have not heard, you are being charmingly naive in falling in line with the worst people.
I can give a very compelling case
people
for it.
in this country. The worst people in this country who want more than anything for the will of the people to be subverted. They want to suffocate Trump and all he stands for, and he is, of course, merely a proxy. He's a shorthand for a variety of things that they hate about Americans. They hate the gaucheness of the South. They hate everything about the South. They hate Appalachia, with its lack of sophistication. They despise and are contemptuous of the people who love Trump, and they are the architects of their misery. I mean, there's a reason that these places that vote for Trump have drug problems. It's because the coastal elites systematically killed these towns by taking all the manufacturing abroad to weaken the economic clout of places of Republican places.
Now,
these places were deliberately and systematically sabotaged, and the result of that is like human misery on a scale that nobody really truly comprehends. There's now no reason for many of these towns in the South to exist, and they stagger on with no factories, with no jobs, with no hope, and people lose themselves in godlessness and in drugs and in all manner of self-destructive behaviors. That was done to them. That was the thing that was done to them. Okay, and Trump is a neat shorthand for the kinds of people that coastal elites consider to be.
Now, here at this point he's making here is really, really important. What I see right now is an entire cadre of the new establishment right jumping behind DeSantis. I think that there is a good reason for that outside of anything nefarious or anything what Milo's talking about. I think that there is they honestly believe in their heart of hearts that Trump can't win a general election. I don't know if that's true. I think there's merit to the argument. I think it's something that needs to be brought up as the primary moves along. But again, DeSantis or Trump neither have said they're going to run. But it's obvious that both are. And they know, the DeSantis crew knows that there is going to be at least half of the Republican Party base, if not more, that will not abandon Trump. But they have to eliminate or take over the other half that likes Trump, but doesn't like the way that the media makes Trump appear to be, right? And some of that is because that is the way Trump is, and some of that is because they have a vested interest in making him and highlighting the worst parts of himself, even trying to make that bigger than what it is. Right? And what Milo's hitting on here is the only time we must remember that in 2016, Trump was up against Jeb Bush and up against Marco Rubio and up against these other people that were still very much in line with the Jeb Bush section of the party, which again comes from Florida. Okay? Don't remember Jeb Bush was the governor of Florida. And George W. Bush, the governor of Texas. Now, the two biggest conservative states in the country. And Trump dispatched all of them, and they all have grudges against him. And they all, in terms of draining the swamp, they are the swamp. And DeSantis has surrounded himself with these people on a large scale because they come with a lot of money. And it must be known that Paul Ryan, ladies and gentlemen, was in charge of a lot of the staffing for the Trump administration. He helped staff, Bolton and a lot of the people that you complain about being the swamp were implanted there by the people supporting Ron DeSantis right now. Trump didn't catch that for a long time. He didn't get the people out that he should have gotten out. He kept these people in office when he shouldn't have. But they were implanted there by people he trusted who are actively against him right now and have been actively against him the whole time, just without being open about it. So the one thing I can say about Trump is he went through 4 years of knowing what the swamp was and learning what the swamp was. Did he not? And if he were to get another 4-year term, I think would be much better at knowing who he had to get rid of. Don't you think? Than Ron DeSantis going in completely cold. Now, Ron DeSantis is also more detail-oriented. Ron DeSantis seems to be more policy-driven. Ron DeSantis seems to have a better concept of the policies and the intricacies of administration. But I will tell you this as somebody who studied presidential administrations my entire life, and even you go back to the most prepared administrator in the history of the presidency. You go to Dwight Eisenhower, is the most prepared administrator. He knew the apparatus better than anybody walking into that, except maybe George H.W. Bush. But he knew, and even it was hard to control the apparatus. And he left office saying, look, guys, there's this whole swamp, there's this whole military-industrial complex that sits beneath the presidency in this giant apparatus that was created by Herbert Hoover and Truman after World War II that he had trouble controlling. And you saw it kind of take over the apparatus after Kennedy became president. Trump had 4 years of seeing that up close. DeSantis is going to be walking in cold. And no matter who you are, the presidency hits back. That's the if you read the book, The President's Club, is a great book, right? They talk about you can be the most, visionary, inspiring president. You can go in and have a good knowledge of the way things work, but always the presidency hits you back. And Trump at least knows where the swamp is and where it came from. DeSantis seems to be surrounding himself with people that actually implanted the swamp and kept the swamp in Trump's administration. I don't know enough about that to make that case decisively. I'm just saying that is a concern, and that's what Milo's saying here.
Beneath them, and them, okay, all manner of self-destructive behaviors that was done to them. That was done. That was the thing that was done to them. Okay, and Trump is a neat shorthand for the kinds of people that coastal elites consider to be beneath them. And the DeSantis project is about ensuring that Trump was a temporary, unfortunate blip, never to be repeated, because they think they have the right to determine that. They think they have the right to dictate that. I don't think that's going to pan out for them. I think they're going to continue to be humiliated, just as they have been every time they've tried this since.
Let me ask you a question.
I would love to hear your case for DeSantis because
absolutely. But my first question would just be, if we took Trump and DeSantis and we made a Venn diagram of everything they agreed on, what are the differences that you see that DeSantis doesn't have? That what is that X factor that Trump does have that you're talking about?
Well, you just said it. Trump is
the X factor.
Trump is a once in a generation
this is
charismatic authority that cannot be replicated. It cannot be imitated. As somebody who has a little slice of that kind of charisma myself, and has experienced.
And this is my point of the video of what I wanted to do this video. Tim is really good. Tim is exceptionally good at his job. He runs a great show. He controls the what he wants to come out of his work product. He is incredibly intelligent. He knows what he's talking about. He has tons of experience, but he cannot hang with Milo Yiannopoulos. And the point is here, and I'm not saying that to bash on Tim. This is the point that Milo's making about Trump to DeSantis, is that DeSantis isn't saying anything. DeSantis is heading in the background. And quite frankly, there is a giant cadre of flying monkeys being sent out to make the case for DeSantis over Trump that Trump doesn't have right now, because Trump isn't on Twitter, which is still the main thoroughfare, the main square for these kinds of discussions. He's over on his own platform that only usually the most diehard Trump people are on. And so he's not getting his message the way that he did in 2016, 2015 out into the populace. If Trump were on Twitter right now, all the people pushing the narrative that Trump lost the election and this is Trump's fault would be drowned out by a single tweet for Donald Trump. And this is what I've said over and over again, is that we now have this social media segregation, right? And it's usually done by disparaging people in the background, whether that's Trump or the other people that may disagree with what the approved narrative is right now, guys. And they're being attacked in the background. Trump responds in public, which is what Trump has done. And then the thing is, well, DeSantis is not even going after him, and he did so great. And Trump is just trying to divide everybody and blah, blah, blah. These are the same people that were cheering Trump on for doing the exact same thing in 2015, 2016. These are the exact same people that were cheering Trump on for doing exactly what Trump is doing for the entire time he was president. And now they're taking that line, that kind of establishment line. Do you want to have somebody like that again? They're feeding into what makes Trump an unpalatable candidate and enlarging that beyond what it might actually be, which is exactly what the establishment cadre tried to do to him the entire time he was in office. And DeSantis is just sitting back above the fray, very smartly, not saying a word about it, and letting the flying monkeys do his job for him. Because they are trying their best to move that unmovable rock that is the Trump base. Because they know what Milo is saying here. If they get them on stage together, there's going to be a very, very, very difficult time. Think about the one debate that happened between Trump and Biden. They used COVID as an excuse to have no audience, which is something Trump feeds off of. And they used COVID to only have one debate, period. And they blunted his ability to overshadow Biden in the way that Milo is talking about right now by removing the visual apparatuses that would have made Trump dominate that forum. And then they made sure that there was no other debate that was going to happen beyond that. And it was, again, the whole message of that debate was Trump is crazy. He keeps stepping all over. He keeps calling names and all this stuff. And everybody who's now blaming Trump for that, for doing that same thing to kind of DeSantis right now, was praising him for it then. And again, I tend to lean DeSantis. I have for a while. But I'm just pointing out a little manipulation here. That's all. And that's perfectly, I mean, Trump's got to figure out how to do that. He's got to figure out how to deal with that if he's going to win, because I'll tell you, DeSantis has the cadre. DeSantis has the message right now. And he has it in the form of influencers, paid or unpaid, influenced on their, being influenced to influence. And they actively shout down and ignore people, other people who might even just academically, the way I feel like I do, disagree with some of that manipulation. And it's a very Machiavellian way of acting, is that it's okay if we lie about it. It's okay if we mischaracterize what's happening, because our ends justify the means. And what they're thinking their ends is that we actually get a Trump-ian-like candidate willing to do the same kinds of things, and he'll be more electable, and so he'll actually get in office as to where Trump won't. That's their case. But they're deceiving you to do it. Make no mistake. They're deceiving you to do it. And they're setting up narratives that don't necessarily exist to do it. That's what bothers me. That's the only thing that bothers me. Again, I don't think you can lose with either candidate at this point. I don't, in terms of if they would win the general election. But let the two guys go at it a little bit, instead of it being flying monkeys against Trump. That's my only concern.
Retinue of desperate clingers and imitators in my life. I can tell you, it never pans out trying to, just snatch the bits that you can stomach from the guy everybody loves, and otherwise keep serving your special interests. Trump is a, look, whether you believe in God or not, you could express this in terms of ordainment if you wanted to, or you could just say that some people are born with a magical kind of personality that captivates people in a way that nobody else can imitate.
In terms of what people are getting from
DeSantis, on the other hand, has no identifiable personality at all.
Well, sure. But what symbol, policy, feeling do people get from Trump? What victory?
You're making the mistake that all politically minded people make, which is assuming that people vote on the basis of policy.
Ooh, I said feeling.
He said feeling or policy.
DeSantis has scored some victories in Florida. He's been an excellent governor in Florida, and that's where he should stay, because he's been a very successful and excellent governor in Florida. But as I said, people like him in some bits of Florida almost as much as they like Trump. But ask them to choose, and
I'm trying to figure out
on the
gain people get from Trump they don't get from DeSantis, and that can be emotional.
It's precisely that magical intangible that you try to articulate and stumble.
To put this in another, it's the same intangible that people got from Obama that they don't get from Biden or Hillary Clinton. And even if you can be right, left on the spectrum, Obama had it. You just have to admit it. Obama was that kind of candidate. And because of that intangible, he was able to make changes and able to govern his party in a way that Biden is not able to do, that Hillary Clinton wouldn't have been able to do, that Bill Clinton was able to do in many cases, that John Kennedy was able to do in many cases, that Ronald Reagan was able to do in many cases, that people like Jimmy Carter were not, that people like George W. Bush were not, or George H.W. Bush were not. This is real. And here soon, Luke is going to try to pejorativize that as a cult of personality. And I want you to hear that and what Milo says that, because I think it's a very, very, very good point.
And then when you go to a rally, you're like, that's what I was talking about.
Kymatics, man. It's vibration. It actually alters DNA.
I don't know about that, but
sound can change the way people's body structure.
That sounds like nonsense, but
it's real. That's amazing. That's why music can heal people and stuff.
No.
So the people's voices.
Definitely not. But
and what I like about Milo is he just doesn't entertain anything he doesn't agree with. He just does not entertain anything he doesn't agree with and shuts it down instantly. And it's like, I love, of all the guys there, Ian is the nicest guy. I'm telling you, he engages people in good faith. I don't think Tim and Luke necessarily do that. I don't think that they do, but Milo just shuts them down. And again, I want to point this out. People are going to say this about me. They've already tried. I don't agree with everything that Milo says here. I'm talking about what he illustrates, because Tim is a very successful person. This is an allegory for Trump versus DeSantis. In what Milo is describing here is being illustrated in his appearance on the show, if you want to get meta about it. He's saying that Trump has an intangible that DeSantis does not. Milo has an intangible that Tim does not. They're both successful. They're both good at what they do. But Milo holds forth, and the reason why he's not on the platform is because he has that intangible. He dominated Twitter before anybody else did. He dominated YouTube. He dominated these podcasts. He still has an outsized influence, even though he hasn't been on a platform for 5 years. He can get on a show and just completely knock it down. And that's what he does here.
There are people who are born with that gift, and they typically find some way in which to express it. Some of them become singers, some of them become actors. And
saying Trump exudes charisma doesn't quantify what's happening for us in a way that, so for me,
of course
right?
It does.
Well, no, right.
Mesmerizing.
I get that. But so a lot of people are motivated.
He's an intoxicant that blots out the sun.
See, just look. Milo is doing to Tim what he's describing. Milo is doing to Tim what it is he's describing about the difference between Trump and DeSantis. That's what I want you to understand here. And Milo hit on that point. He says he has a slice of what Trump has. And I'm not saying that that is a great thing. I'm not saying that it is but it's the ability to dominate a conversation, is the ability to take all of the oxygen in the room when you're in the presence. And that's why I believe, and mark my words here, I think that the Republicans and the people who are backing DeSantis are going to wait as long as possible before they are forced to put Trump and DeSantis on the same stage. And he will be very, very prepped. And there will be a spin machine behind him which you've never seen before in your life. And Trump has to get ready for that if he wants to be effective. Otherwise, he's going to be taken over. DeSantis is a good candidate. But what Milo is describing here about Trump v. DeSantis, he's also illustrating in his interactions with Luke and with Tim.
There's no conventional political candidate who has a chance.
What does an intelligent individual or working class person gain from that? A good feeling?
I don't know what kind of logical fallacy that is. What does an intelligent person gain?
Because you're saying the average person doesn't care about policy.
I can't speak for intelligent people, but
so if no one actually cares about what their politicians are doing for them, then why should I care about Trump over DeSantis?
Trump is what happened in 2016 was the last time that half this country felt good about themselves and like there might be hope. You cannot fight that.
Hope for what?
Trump.
What?
Their world wouldn't be ripped apart by social engineering and by other things I can't mention right now until the third hour. But there are things going on in this country that threaten the very basis of our civilization, that stem from original sins like women's suffrage, but go all the way through to more modern fads and manias to do with things we can't talk about. But there is the people are keenly aware that the physical reality of the world they live in, the facts they took for granted, are being ripped apart by the political descendants of.
Now I understand. I understand what you're saying.
So Trump in 2016. I was very blessed to have the opportunity to be such a big part of that, because that was the last time that an entire half of this country felt like things might end up okay. And he turned out to be disappointing in office, but how could he ever have been any? How could he ever have ended up otherwise?
Not appointed really horrible people around him, like John Bolton and Dr. Fauci, and put him in positions of power. That's one of. But one thing I want to bring.
Now that point right there is, again, Trump entrusted a lot of his appointees to Paul Ryan and Paul Ryan's acolytes. Paul Ryan just came out for Ron DeSantis. It's something to note. I'm not saying that it is a definitive, I'm Trump over DeSantis, or that you should be. It's just something to note. DeSantis is his own man and has the ability to confound expectations. But if you're talking about the point that Luke just made,
have been any, how could he ever have ended up otherwise?
Not appointed really horrible people around him, like John Bolton and Dr. Fauci, and put him in positions of power. That's one of. But one thing I want to bring up.
Trump has a weakness for his family.
I want to ask.
He finds it very difficult to say no to his family, I think. But that's the answer to your question. The reason that people will flock to him no matter what, even though they hate what he has to say about certain medical things. They hate it. They can't understand why he's so proud of it. They can't understand why he never shuts up about it. They just want him to stop. It's like, do you know who your base is, bro? But they'll forgive that and everything because he was the last guy that made them feel like justice and hope was within reach.
I'll try and quantify it the way what I'm basically hearing is that there are dark forces that are destroying the fabric of this country. Donald Trump stood in front of that and put a fist up to stop it.
And said it might not be too late. So when Christianity comes into Europe in the Middle Ages, right? It's real innovation is a sort of joy and happiness that's not fueled by self-indulgence and self-destruction. So pagan societies, people losing themselves in music and substances. There's always kind of a cost attached to that kind of ecstasy, right? You get yourself caught up in some kind of hypnotic pagan, trance thing. The nearest cognate we have these days is drug-fueled EDM raids, and it always comes with a cost attached. There's a price to it. When Christianity comes in the Middle Ages, you suddenly see like intensely religious people singing and dancing. They found this way to be happy that doesn't involve killing yourself. In some sort of slow motion suicide, people who are full of the joy of the incarnation, and you have gargoyles pulling faces on cathedrals. You have religious people with smiles on their faces. One of the emotional the capstones of Western civilization is that joy. Another characteristic of our artistic tradition is yearning or longing, right? Most great works of art are about reaching for something, about that sort of romantic frustration.
See, normally Tim would not allow this to just go.
The emotional building blocks of our civilization is joy in Christ, happiness for its own sake. I don't think anybody could plausibly claim that society is getting happier and more joyful. What we've seen with runaway school marmishness and restrictions and regulations, the kind of intolerable and oppressive conditions under which some people, valiantly continue to labor, is a gradual suffocating of a joy. There's nothing recognizable as comedy on television anymore.
Well, just really quick,
I'll be quick. Sorry. That gradual erosion of happiness, people feel that. They're aware of it. They won't articulate it in the way that I did, but they're aware of it, and they know that the last time that something good happened was this crazy guy that they remembered from a TV show who suddenly inspired them with confidence that maybe it wasn't too late to beat back the hordes of hell.
Yeah, it could be also the loss of religion and the overindulgent society that is being prioritized by big tech social media. But when I want to specifically talk about Trump, because I did agree with a lot of things you said, specifically that he does have a cult of personality. He did represent an idea that was going to help the American middle class.
That's a demeaning minimization of what he had. Cult of personality is never a compliment.
Okay, so
cult
this
of
right here
personality means that somebody has managed to baffle and bamboozle their followers into doing destructive things. Cult of personality is
like maybe taking a product that they shouldn't be taking that has been proven, that has been rushed to prove with operation.
Like maybe has managed to.
Okay, so this point right here, first of all, are we running two separate accounts here, guys? I'm not sure what's happening. Yeah, Milo is a Christian, and actually he's kind of he's walking the walk in a way that most people who are he's a Catholic and he's gay, but he says in the third hour that's not on here that he's abandoning his lifestyle as whom he's attracted to because he doesn't feel that it conforms with his message. And so he's actually, I mean, he was married to a man and all this stuff, but he's actually just went completely celibate because it doesn't conform. So that's the kind of person that Milo is right now. He says some really outlandish things I do not agree with, but his intelligence and his ability to grab an audience is unrivaled. Everyone you follow on social media is living in the world that Milo Yiannopoulos helped build. So, Lordy Lord, the extent that people will go to. Okay, but this point that is being made here about cult of personality. Listen to this. This is extremely important. This is extremely important.
Demeaning minimization.
American middle. But when I want to specifically talk about Trump, because I did agree with a lot of things you said, specifically that he does have a cult of personality. He did represent an idea that was going to help the American middle class.
That's a demeaning. That's a demeaning minimization of what he had. Cult of personality is never a compliment. Cult of personality means that somebody has managed to baffle and bamboozle their followers into doing destructive things. Cult of personality is
like maybe taking a product that they shouldn't be taking that has been proven, that has been rushed to prove with Operation Warp Speed. But I just want to specifically get to the point of what happened today, because Trump's messaging doesn't look strong today. He came out and he talked about how he got more votes in Florida during his election. He talked about how one of his endorsements was wrong. And he openly threatened Ron DeSantis on Fox News, saying specifically that DeSantis is going to hurt himself badly if he runs, and that he has some kind of dirt on him that his wife doesn't even know, that he's going to release to the general public. This doesn't seem like a unifier or someone who's going to bring the party together and help the party overall. It seems like he's looking out for himself.
Let me add one.
Even Picasso had a blue period. I mean, Trump is permitted a wobble given what he's been subjected to.
He spent the past year just nonstop talking about the past.
I agree, and I think it's a mistake. Yeah. And I think that he currently sounds pathetic, and I think that he needs to fix it real quick. But let me tell you, the moment that guy that gets his mojo back, there isn't anybody else on the field. And you best believe that will happen.
I missed the point.
Wife does it. DeSantis is going.
Somebody is never a compliment. Minimization,
specifically that he does have a cult of personality. We talk about Trump society right here, that is being prioritized
of hell.
Yeah, it could be also the loss of religion and the overindulgent society that is being prioritized by big tech, social media. But when I want to specifically talk about Trump, because I did agree with a lot of things you said, specifically that he does have a cult of personality. He did represent an idea that was going to help the American middle class.
That's a demeaning. That's a demeaning minimization of what he had. Cult of personality is never a compliment. Cult of personality means that somebody has managed to baffle and bamboozle their followers into doing destructive things. Cult of personality is
like maybe taking a product that they shouldn't be taking, that has been proven, that has been rushed to prove with Operation Warp Speed. But I just want to specifically get to the point of what happened today, because Trump's messaging.
That's what they're doing, is that, okay, because Trump has the intangible that he was talking about. They label it a cult of personality, which again, it's the same thing that Reagan had. It's the same thing that Kennedy had. It's the same thing that FDR had. It's the same thing that Obama had. It's the same thing that Clinton had in many ways. But they're going to pejorativize that because that is a strength on Trump's side against DeSantis or any of the other establishment Republicans. And I'm not saying DeSantis is establishment Republican. At this point, he's being touted by more establishment people than Trump is. That is a fact. That is a fact.
Doesn't look strong today. He came out and he talked about how he got more votes in Florida during his election. He talked about how one of his endorsements was wrong, and he openly threatened Ron DeSantis on Fox News, saying specifically that DeSantis is going to hurt himself.
See, look at this. Luke is reading. Luke was going to bring these things up. He had them written down. He has a little notepad in front of him, sat right next to him, of the things that he's going to bring up. And everything he's saying is decidedly pro DeSantis as opposed to Trump. That's okay. I like DeSantis. But just understand the dynamic here. This is not just, it's lightly scripted. Lightly.
Badly if he runs, and that he has some kind of dirt on him that his wife doesn't even know that he's going to release to the general public. This doesn't.
Which if he would have said the same thing about Jeb Bush or Lindsey Graham running, if he were to be running, or anybody else, the same influencers here would be praising him, and did so. Did they not? For years.
Seem like a unifier or someone who's going to bring the.
And this whole unity message, it's like, oh my God, let's unify behind what it is we want you to say. Don't say anything against what it is that we don't want you to say. Unity means agreeing with us. We've seen that before.
Bring the party together and help the party overall. It seems like he's looking out for himself.
Let me add one.
Even
one point.
Picasso had a blue period. I mean, Trump is permitted a wobble given what he's been subjected to.
He spent the past year just nonstop talking about the
That's
past.
true.
Yeah. And when people want to hear
I agree, and I think it's a mistake.
Yeah,
but the Democrats also did that. Again, they have been attacking Trump since the day he left office with what happened in the past. So, in a way, that's pejorativizing what it is that Trump is having to do to defend himself, because the Democrats, the whole January 6th convention, you know, the whole January 6th committee has been about drudging up the past in relation to one man and him being forced because of that to defend himself. Put that in perspective for a second.
I think that he currently sounds pathetic, and I think that he needs to fix it real quick. But let me tell you, the moment that guy that gets his mojo back, there isn't anybody else on the field. And you best believe that will happen.
That's a video we should make. Seamus. Trump got his mojo back.
You best believe that will happen shortly after he announces, when he has kind of, I think, emotionally reinvested in the fight. But this is a guy who...
Art of war.
This is
Make your enemies think you're weak when you're strong, right? Is that what it is?
I don't know if Trump thinks in those terms. I don't know if he's...
I'm only half kidding.
I don't know if he's read a book, but I don't know if he's read his own. But he doesn't need to, because he has that gift that a couple of people per generation have, which is when they're in a good spot and they're firing all cylinders, they just have an atavistic, reflexive, natural understanding of their people, and he's an interesting anomaly, because typically you see this in Europe, where there are more explicitly established class systems, right? So class operates in America, but everybody pretends it doesn't exist, which is why you don't really understand half of what's happening. But there's a weird affinity between the aristocracy and the working classes in European countries that retain some vestige of aristocratic systems. And it's something to do with the fact they live in the same places. They both live, rurally in the countryside. They have some of the same hobbies. They are involved in the same kinds of bits of the economy. But they also have a similar outlook on the world. They tend to be...
Ron DeSantis went to Yale. Does everybody know that? Just pointing that out.
Conservationists rather than environmentalists, if that makes sense. They have a kind of understanding that the anxious middle classes, the doctors, teachers, and lawyers who live in big cities, can't understand. Trump managed to pull that off in a way that I don't know if any American really ever has before. Reagan maybe had a little kind of dollop of it, but not to this extent. Trump, perhaps because of his ludicrousness.
Yes,
his putting his name in gold on the side of his buildings, on his plane, the sort of extravagant and yet at the same time kind of mid-brow, mid-market version of opulence that he was showing people set him so far apart from ordinary people that he just managed to form this kind of like weird but real bond in a way I've only seen previously in these vestigial class systems, and it's something to do with the fact that when he's listening to his own instincts instead of certain family members and
like Ivanka Trump that told him to bomb Syria.
Well, her husband is the problem,
and Jared Kushner, who represents the establishment and is tied to some really seedy and bad places and people.
Well, Steve got fired for the same reason that I'm going to get escorted out of here, is finds it very difficult.
Talking about Steve Bannon.
So when he described Ivanka as dumb as a box of rocks, as soon as I read it, I was like, yeah, Steve said that.
Steve Bannon.
But this is my fear, Milo. I just want to bring this up really quickly.
She's not a diabolical architect of her father's destruction. She's a very easily influenced woman who's very in love with her husband and anxious to maintain some kind of social status independent of her father, which means distinguishing herself from the views of his that are unpopular with New Yorkers.
And I absolutely agree with you, but aren't you fearful that the establishment base of the party has been kicked out or prosecuted or is being currently put in jail, while the establishment wing of the Trump administration is still the anti-establishment is getting thrown in jail, has been kicked out of his administration, and the pro-establishment side is still surrounding him.
I don't think that whatever petty humiliations visited upon those brave enough to raise their head above the parapet, I don't think those ultimately inconsequential humiliations have much of an effect at all.
Like Ivanka's there, but Bannon's not.
Yes, but look, there are those of us who are called, compelled, whatever. I didn't feel like it doesn't feel like much of a choice to me. It just feels like what I was put here to do, to charge out in front and accept the cost of that and what comes with it, and those sort of spectacles, those moments in culture, those moments in history, they linger for decades. They have an effect vastly more complex and far-reaching than people usually appreciate. And when people watched certain things happening to center-right popular funny guys, it will shape the thinking of Republican voters for decades. The fact that there is for all of the wailing of the left about systemic injustice, which can never really be located or convincingly explained, there is a hideous injustice that has been visited on them and many of the people that they have admired and loved. That stuff shapes the way that people live and the way they think. It shapes their opinions of new players on the scene. There will always be sacrificial lambs. That doesn't in itself mean anything bad, usually the opposite. Martyrs are remembered for a reason.
Yeah, but do you feel let down because you were one of the people that was really behind Donald Trump? So were a lot of other people that were censored, that were punished, that were banned on social media. And a lot of people think that Trump was in a position of power where he could have stood up for his supporters, stood up for all the individuals that were going down, taken down as he was in positions of power. Do you feel like slighted in any way where he could have done something to big tech social media? He could have reined them in. And he could have also gone to Parler. He could have also stood up for free speech, but he didn't.
I understand why a 70-year-old man might not have comprehended the priority that was. Look, I watched the canceled summit at the White House, and I noted, like everybody else, that nobody who had actually been canceled was invited.
Yeah.
It is a fact of historical record that every year when the new interns came into the White House, they were asked if anybody was a fan of Alex Jones or Milo Yiannopoulos. And if they said yes, they were escorted off the premises.
Interns for Trump?
For the White House interns.
And you guys were the biggest
That happened every year that Trump was in office. Now, Trump bears ultimate responsibility for his hiring decisions, but the whole apparatus of the party was deeply committed to a business model that Trump threatened to wreck inside a generation. The gravy train might be over if he succeeded. The antibody response, that you saw to Trump was the aggressive, ruthless, sociopathic response of people who are wedded to earthly riches.
Yep.
Seeing their hoard threatened by somebody who could, cast a spell and impoverish them. I wouldn't want 2016, 17 to have played out any other way.
And this is what we need to be careful of with DeSantis, is that DeSantis has aligned himself in some cases with a lot of the people that are so anti-Trump that they're willing to get behind anybody that they think that can take him down. And when they get behind people, they exude influence. I mean, just think about how much influence they exude. If Paul Ryan was helping pick the people that we most dislike from the Trump administration, they exerted influence in that space when he was anti their entire agenda. What will they be able to do in an administration that they might have more influence in because they've handed money hand over fist? Now, DeSantis is his own guy. And this is all just, I'm introducing you to my thought process, which I'm sure will be grabbed by people and then parroted as their own, which is what grifters do. And then Milo speaks to that kind of thing where you have people that, I've been doing this in my own community for 2 years, longer than most people even knew what was happening. And I have active people just come in and say, well, what would you say about this? What would you say about that? Da, 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 and then go and parrot it out because they're liked more than me. I'm really getting to the point where I don't give a good damn what people think about me at all anymore. And maybe I should have gotten there a long time ago, but that's where I'm going to say what it is that I'm going to say. And I'm going to put it on the record, and every single time someone else uses it, I'm going to troll you with what I said. And that's kind of what Milo did. That's kind of what James Lindsay has done. But my point is here is that Milo is articulating something that is very anti what the new conservative right is wanting people to hear. And I think the reason he was brought on this show, not the reason, but I think what they're trying to do is pejorativize him in the same way. Look, if Milo Yiannopoulos thinks this, then it must be crazy. That is a logical fallacy known as, demeaning the source. And if you engage in that as a person on the right, then you are being woke. Get it? And that's why I refuse to do it, even in terms of like people like Paul Ryan or anything like that, is that I'm making the point that if you are upset with the Paul Ryan wing of the party and the influence they had over Trump, then you need to be cognizant and aware of that when you're picking DeSantis as your candidate. You see the difference? I'm not saying that they're bad because Paul Ryan's supporting them. What I'm saying is that if you hold that view, then you need to be smart enough and non-tribal enough to look at it and say, well, even though everyone I likes DeSantis, I don't like Paul Ryan, and Paul Ryan is endorsing DeSantis. Right? That's called thinking, as opposed to parroting what other people tell you to think, because you may get some outsized influence and some retweets and clicks. Trust me, I played that game. I played it better than anybody else who's trying to play it right now in my own community. And what I found is that it ends up making you lose. It ends up making you lose. And you end up getting a lot of fluff for not a lot of substance.
What possible better story is there than of these people who were, it's like, people were robbed of us, it sounds conceited to say, but, this fascinating and exciting corner, well, it wasn't a corner, it was culture really, was sort of wiped out by bad people.
Milo is a Catholic. He talks about it on the show. He's a Catholic who was gay, who has become so Catholic that he's now undergoing what most people would call a conversion therapy to. He's remained celibate because he doesn't believe it comports with his beliefs as a Catholic, as a Christian. Watch the whole episode. Milo is a Christian. He's a Catholic.
With bad intentions, and no one was ever held accountable for it, and everybody feels poorer as a result. Without cancel culture, you wouldn't operate under the appalling conditions that you do. I don't know how you do it every day. I couldn't get up in the morning. And I that's why I don't wish for it to go any differently than it did. I think the lasting impression and the righteous indignation that produced is one of the most powerful motivating energies behind the Republican base.
Well, what do you think about Elon Musk buying Twitter and everything that's happened so far?
Well, a sensible person would probably say they're cautiously optimistic. The thing I've been following most closely is his. So somebody sent me a Telegram channel that just kind of catalogs all of his activity on Twitter, and I don't so much look at what he tweets because that's obviously through the lens of public management, whatever.
This is really
what's more telling, and where I think everybody kind of gives themselves away, is in those casual likes that happen at 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. And the way he's
telling you how to read Twitter
brutally handled Kathy Griffin.
How I've caught most.
What I look for when I'm trying to kind of work out what's really going on, I try to think, what's making this guy smile? What is bringing this guy happiness, satisfaction, joy, because that I find to be a reliable indicator of future behavior. So I'm looking at some of the stuff that Musk likes, and I'm getting a bit more optimistic. And then, when he said,
"This is a great,"
she was impersonated for she was banned for impersonating a comedian. That's funnier than anything that Kathy Griffin has ever said.
It's true.
That's funnier than her whole career.
Yeah.
And this tells me that he takes great personal satisfaction in seeing justice served to those who have been living high on the hog for far too long, abusing and insulting the rest of us while not allowing us to respond in kind. And that tells me that he is powerfully motivated to see justice done publicly.
So do you think that Kathy Griffin was a good move or a bad move?
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal because
and what he's talking about here is basically Elon Musk's ability to troll people. And again, you're talking Milo Yiannopoulos is the king troll. He's the original troll. He literally forced changes in Twitter that led to their downfall. He forced them to expose themselves as who they were, which is why they kicked him off, by the way. And again, I'm not a fan of a lot of what Milo Yiannopoulos has said. I think he's grown up. I think this interview shows he's grown up a lot, and he talks about that a little bit. What he's articulating here is the root of his message, which is he doesn't like manipulation. I'm in that camp. I think there are lots of people on the right and the left who don't like manipulation. I most don't like being manipulated by people who say that they're against the manipulators. That to me makes you just as bad. And if you manufacture things that aren't true to win an argument, why would you do that? What would be your purpose? There's so much we can use that it actually happened, right? There's so much that we can actually use that has actually happened. Why do we need to manufacture anything? And if you actively avoid the root of the problem, then automatically I'm going to look at you and second guess what it is that your goal is. And that's what I've seen a lot from the right in many different cases, is that they really want to hyperinflate the symptoms of the problem as opposed to actually going toward the direct center of the problem. That to me makes me go, you're not an honest dealer. You're just looking to grift and to give yourself power by whatever problems have been caused. That's a woke tendency. That's the way the woke dominated the culture in 2021, 2020, and leading up to now, is they lied.
I mean, Elon is the king of vaporware, and that's very frustrating. But at the same time, he has a sense of theater and spectacle, and
you need that.
It was classically intelligent, Elon, because it was just the right demonstration that he meant what he was saying. He put his money where his mouth was. He put one of the most famous comedians in America in the sin bin, and then insulted her.
Amazing.
And forced her to tweet from her dead mother's Twitter account, which she then tried to play off as like knowingly ghoulish, but she just looked weird.
Yeah.
I mean, she's now. I mean, she is a damaged figure anyway. But she is a greatly diminished figure as a result of this interaction.
He didn't force her; she decided to do it herself, which is disgusting in itself.
The mom thing was just kind of like the clown world capstone. The way in which he brought her to heel by being funnier than she has ever been, which is supposed to be her job. I mean, like, who would go up against a comedian on Twitter? Anyone, because they're not funny, because they're not allowed to be anymore. The basis of comedy for centuries was laughing about our differences so that we can realize they're not that serious.
Exactly. That's comedy in its essence.
Right. Because when you point out in an affectionate way, amusing ways in which you differ from somebody else has the effect of bringing people closer together, not driving them apart. And a deliberate misunderstanding of this is behind, the death of joy that I was talking about. But he chose just the right person who had already damaged herself with the Trump head, and therefore was difficult to defend, to demonstrate that he really meant what he said.
Yep.
And then in a final act of sadism, which I enjoyed, he said, I guess if she really wants her account back, she can have it, meaning beg.
He said for $8.
For $8, yeah. which is great too. You can say what you want about me, that's going to be $8.
He's the giant troll among trolls.
He basically said to her,
platform.
I have humiliated you in front of the world. You can come back, but you got to beg me.
Yeah.
That's what, and in doing that, he, in a sense, was speaking for all of us in that moment, and we were all kind of like, this is what we've been waiting for, and we got a little glimmer of maybe what we felt in 2016, but it was more than that. It was putting his money where his mouth was, right?
Yeah.
Not that he hadn't done it already, but I mean,
he kind of has
borrowed most of the money for the.
Where's the Babylon Bee?
Put a lot
Where
of debt
is
on books, but who wouldn't?
James Lindsay? Where are all the accounts that were supposed to be brought back?
Showing us that he meant it. He actually did mean it, and it was
it's worth asking.
Stand by and stand back, or whatever it is. It was just hold on. I'm going to deal with this.
You made a very important point about comedy healing society. And I think one reason why society is so ravaged is because comedy has been pretty much been made illegal. I remember your Patrick Ewing comment. We don't have to get into the specifics of it, but I remember it just being hilarious. But specifically, if you were given the chance one more time to go back on Twitter, would you take it? And how would you post differently? How would you be different, or would you be the same?
Everybody sitting in the room. And it's how he illustrates what he says about DeSantis v. Trump. It is the difference between Milo Yiannopoulos and Luke and Tim. They are living in the house that Milo built and was expelled from. And it's why they couldn't get a word in edgewise most of the time during this episode. Is because when he starts talking, whether he's saying good or bad things, right? You can't compete with him. And I never really followed Milo Yiannopoulos that much. I had experienced some of his stuff. He was really provocative. He said some really crazy things that I think even he has regretted. He doesn't like being censored. What I agree with him is that he shouldn't have been censored, is beat him in his argument. Right? But he was the catalyst for the whole censorship movement. He and Alex Jones and that is far extended beyond down to libs of TikTok. That is far, anybody you're following now that is getting banned but magically wasn't banned. It's kind of crazy how that worked out. Just like James Lindsay was banned for saying the word saying the term, okay, groomer, and coming up with that. And then entire accounts with the word in their names get banned, but get brought back to the platform before Elon Musk took it over. Explain to me how that works. Anybody? Any of the lurkers got that? I would love to know how that works. You know? That to me goes, somebody's got a line in that the other people don't. And this was before Elon Musk bought Twitter. But James Lindsay can never get a,
has had a very different trajectory after cancellation to me. I'm sorry, people are going to know who I'm talking about, and some of them are friends and some of them used to be friends, but I've just seen people become just destroyed. I've seen people wreck themselves through this hysterical kind of manufactured grief about a Twitter account. It was never that serious. It was never that important to me. It was just one medium through which I enjoyed amusing people. But for some people, it was kind of all they had. And many of those people have been wrecked by this. They're not the same people they were in 2015. And I saw some of my friends, people I'd previously admired, doing this kind of, pathetic clamoring for some glimmer of former relevance, doing anything at all costs to stay in the headlines occasionally. And I frankly, I felt that it was squalid and decrepit and beneath me, and was absolutely not interested in lowering myself to that. So I think I've emerged from it the most psychologically intact, because everybody I know was driven crazy by it. In ancient Rome, when an emperor was especially bad,
listen to this. This is really
they would do something
great.
that was later called damnatio memoriae. So when the emperor died, they would chip his name off buildings and smash his busts, with the goal of erasing him from history. The idea was that nobody would be able to tell in future, because in Europe, in Western civilization, we used to think in terms of civilization, of legacy.
Yeah.
When the patriarchy was intact, we thought more about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so the Romans were very concerned about how they would be viewed in future. So when somebody was especially cruel or wicked or crazy, they went to great lengths to erase them from history. There's something oddly more sadistic and wretched is happening now, because people are alive to see their own erasure. And that's new in history. There's no really real close equivalent to that.
Dave Chappelle talks about this in a different capacity. What he says is that, that taking away a man's ability to support themselves, which in this case would be their public influence, is tantamount to killing them. That's what he says about this kind of erasure. And Milo's discussing it in terms of, that after emperors would die, is that if they were bad, they would be erased, but they were never around to see it. And now the people who get erased now, whether it's oftentimes by their own side, right? Through efforts that they try to hide, right? Is that you're erasing them in front of themselves before they're gone. And that's psychologically damaging to people. That hurts people in a way that has not really been experienced before in society. And that is a tool and a weapon that they use to silence people and remove their influence when they don't toe the party line. Yeah, it is about free speech. Free speech used to be about, I don't agree with what you say, but I will fight to the death for your right to say it. Now what it's about is free speech is, I'm in the largest group of people saying what it is, both right and left, by the way. I'm in the largest group of what the narrative is. And if you are saying something, we're either going to knock you down, discredit you in private, force you to respond in public and call you insane, or just ignore you to the fact that, it's and then prop up people who claim to be independent minded and criticize people, but they in turn they only criticize their friends with kid gloves, and then they criticize everybody else like they would, like they should. It's like, criticize me, but criticize my points. Don't try to come after me personally because you don't like what I say. Right? That's what he's saying here.
I used to have banishment.
Well, yeah, sure, but you can go and you can make a new life, but to be forcibly installed on the sidelines, watching as your name and your work and your reputation is destroyed and dismantled and urinated on. That's something that not even the most sadistic and insane Roman emperors suffered. And I can understand why a lot of people find it traumatic. Perhaps I had a bit more of a healthy attitude to all that in the first place, so I didn't kind of feel a existential loss of like, it's a Twitter account. I still have my house, still have my health.
But it came up at a time where he was able to build all of that before they started cracking down.
Make me wake up in a cold sweat thinking I've lost everything, as it did to some other people, because I think I maybe had a bit of a better appreciation of what it represented and what it didn't. But I understand why they're traumatized. It's been very upsetting. I personally would do nothing different at all.
Will you come back on the platform?
Sorry, that was your question. I don't know. I feel like, I kind of like sort of define that era, and me coming back is going to be like there's only all roads lead to some kind of disappointing tribute act to past glories, and I don't really believe in kind of trying to resurrect past successes. I'm happy that they happened and all the rest of it, but I'm not somebody that can live that way. So if I do, it will probably be in a very different format and a very different style. It's a battlefield that I comprehensively conquered, and I don't feel the need to revisit it because I beat it. I beat it so much that they had to institute the regime that followed. They had a hashtag.
And what he said right there, he beat it so comprehensively, they had to institute a regime that followed. How did they do that? They knocked down people like James Lindsay. They knocked down people over time that dared to fight with the narrative that's being plunged out in public. And I just think it's so funny that influencers right now, whether they're coming up or they've been there, they started out the same time I did in 2020, and we're, sitting at 10,000 followers, and then now we're 500,000 followers. But they got there by implanting and connecting themselves with establishment money and establishment narratives and establishment policies while claiming to be anti-establishment. That's the worst kind of lie to me. That's the worst kind of lie, is you pretending to be something you're not and then profiting off of pretending to be something you're not, and then pushing an establishment narrative in the Machiavellian sense of, well, me lying to you will get you a better life, and I've decided that for you. Who the hell are you? And some of these people actively took work that I had done and helped them do, and now are just, well, we don't want to have anything to do with him or that or da, 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 da. And it's like, man, you're a pretender that's grifting off of work that you haven't done because you had a larger platform and connections to people that you were willing to sell out to. And you live off of that with unabashed glee. But deep down inside, you know that you don't have it. And I'm not saying we don't help each other. I'm not saying that I haven't benefited from relationships. That's part of life. But when you actively use people's work and the time and the effort, and then you turn around and you demean them to play it off as if it was yours, you know, for my Christians in here, how Christian is that? Not very.
I can't say the word.
They had to make rules because of you.
They did. I mean, it set the trajectory for the failure of the company, you know, and that's something I regard with nostalgia and satisfaction. And revisiting it would be to fall prey to a sort of debilitating temptation to live in the past.
I found. Let me. Rob, you're sorry. I want
to act in the present.
Milo, I want to ask you this question because you talked about legacy and the Roman emperors. I'm wondering if you think the loss of that in modern civilization, that many people no longer care about their legacy and their history, is a defining factor in why things are the way they are, falling, becoming darker.
Yes, it's a product of women's suffrage.
And see, this is where he goes off the rails a little bit. Even it's like, whoa.
Plausible candidates for office changed.
But this is how conservative he is. He's like uber conservative on some things. He doesn't believe that he believes that women getting the right to vote put them in a situation that made them fail. And that led them toward so for those of you who are like, well, he's not a conservative or da. He's probably more conservative than you are. Because he believes that men failed, and I'm not espousing his viewpoint here, but he's saying that men failed by giving women the vote because they put pressure on them that took them outside of the home. That's what he's going to talk about here. And that's whoa. I mean, I think if you're on, you're going to, but again, he makes points. Should he be canceled for those points? Just because you don't agree, I don't.
The voting base broadened, and I don't think it's controversial to say that the sexes are different and have different.
It actually is now.
Priorities and different preoccupations and different ways of approaching the question, who do I want, right? I am of the view that women's suffrage changed politics for the worse, because I think it opened the floodgates to opportunistic, charming sociopaths who might previously have been weeded out.
Okay, now let me make a point against him here. Trump would follow, based upon his own assessment of what Trump is, would fall into exactly what it is that he's describing here. But it's a commonly known fact that women don't really like Trump. See, this is what I'm talking about in terms of thinking about what it is you're listening to. And there was a comment up here that said this. Frosted, I don't want you to unfollow conservative influencers. I just want to point that out. I think that's fine. Just know what they're doing. That's all. Just be able to look at it with because Matt Walsh said this, I'm going to follow it because I like what he says about this. Don't be tribalistic. Think for yourself. Question anything anybody says as to why and how they're going to be doing it. Do that to me, do that to anybody. I don't agree with everything that Milo Yiannopoulos says, and I just pointed out a thing here that he kind of shot himself in the foot in terms of his argument against Trump or for Trump. Trump very much falls into the category of what he just described, according to him.
Considered not the right kind of person. Sometimes you see glimpses of this in, I mean, if you watch Mary Poppins, right? And the dad, who's kind of like vilified, Mr. Banks, is the only virtuous character in the whole thing. And he's talking about how discipline, order, and that essential English virtue, restraint, are the basis of a well-function of a orderly civilization. And those are the virtues, the values, the habits that we should aspire to. And all around him, he's got this.
Talking about Mary Poppins.
He's got this pampered, prideful mess of a wife who can't be bothered to be a mother, and is churning through nannies instead because she's got her whatever. There's this witch who descends from the sky and gives the kids psychedelic drugs, I guess.
Yeah, we got to remake this movie, by the way.
And tells them, no, it's already there. They already did it. She kind of wears the thin veneer of rules and manners, but really she preaches chaos. And she undermines. There's stuff in that movie that is on purpose. In Feed the Birds, you know, she has the audacity to claim knowledge of what the saints think about, you know, airborne rodents pooping on cathedrals, damaging the architecture. It's a very subversive movie about the triumph of witchcraft over virtue. But you know,
now tell me you think he's not a conservative?
Mary Poppins?
It's like, oh my
hideous.
God,
It's
fascinating.
No, it's very dark. It's very dark. You have this.
We have to do like a thing where we watch it and you do like a director's commentary kind of thing where you explain all this stuff.
There's a show in Britain, I think, called Gogglebox, where the show is two people on a couch talking about the show they're watching, and it sounds like unendurable, but it's really good.
Bobblebox,
Gogglebox. I think I've never seen it, but everybody loves it. No, I mean, there's so much in that movie, you know, to unpack the way that she presents as an appropriate candidate for the
so
role.
I want to talk about this,
but then immediately sets about wrecking the social order, and it's a particular kind of Christian restraint that Mr. Banks is explaining. He's saying that we can't just give in to every reckless and wild abandoned temptation. He's saying, you know, in order to prosper and to be happy and to be successful and for our ancestors to be proud of us and our descendants to be grateful to us, there are virtues we should cleave to that involve not indulging ourselves. And what does Mary Poppins come and do? She comes and makes a mockery of the business of tidying the room by using witchcraft. So there's no effort expended, violating the natural order of things and teaching the kids that they can do their chores without the effort required, and therefore they don't learn lessons from it. She takes them on this psychedelic journey, teaching them nonsense words. She praises. I mean, you won't know this as Americans, but you don't feed pigeons in London. They're rats with wings. That's what we call them. You know, this lullaby to send people to sleep is about encouraging a vermin that has destroyed the architecture of London. You know,
okay,
everything
so I just want
in
to
that
point
movie
this out.
is about
Sorry.
undermining or overturning the natural order of things. And this is what
So I want to point this out. What he's describing here is the subversive nature of media, going back to when Mary Poppins came out, which I think was the 60s and the 70s, about the seeds of the long march through the institutions that were in our entertainment and our media, going back that far. Because if you look at the Frankfurt School and Marcuse and everything that was coming out of the 60s, especially 72, and you're going back to Roe versus Wade and all these things, they started implanting a mode of thought even within Disney at that point. And we've seen it come to fruition in Disney just recently. And this is Milo Yiannopoulos, the guy that they took off of platforms because of his outlandish statements, supposedly, telling you that a movie that you grew up with and liked was planting seeds in your mind through a very subversive, dark message that we're seeing come to fruition today in 2022. And there are going to be people that take this video, I can already see it happening, that take this video of me talking and talking about Milo Yiannopoulos. They're going to say, look how crazy UnWokable is. Don't listen to him. He's agreeing with Milo Yiannopoulos. They're going to put that next to other things that he said, and they're going to cast us in the same light and say that, you know, look at it. Some people will say that he's bad because he's gay. Some people will say that he's bad because he said these outlandish things. Some people will say, and they will paint me with it. I can already see it happening because it happens all the time. And they'll do it behind the scenes, not in public. And then when I find out about it, I'll respond in public, and then they'll call me crazy and say I'm trying to divide people. That is manipulation, which is why anybody who would see this, which they won't show this part of the video, they never do, is come to me and ask me. If you are believing something someone says about something or someone without knowing and have the opportunity to talk to them about it, have the balls enough to go and talk to them about it. Think for yourself, just maybe. Instead of maybe, well, he criticized this person I like, so therefore, and he he talked well of this person that I am being told is really bad and evil and has said bad things, then therefore I must, he's insane and I can't, That is what has caused society to allow the woke to take over in the first place. That is wokeism 101. Oh my goodness. And we'll said things about Governor Stitt that I just don't like, or Ron DeSantis, or Trump for that matter, or anybody else, then he must be bad because I like those people and therefore I am on that team. He's not on my team. Oh my God, he's a registered independent. But yet they accept Democrats who are preaching their message because they're being propped up through a manufactured set of circumstances in many different cases. You can talk about Barry Weiss, you can talk about all kinds of things like that. There's an alignment of message here. And the message that Milo hit at the beginning is that these people don't want, or they want a set of policies that they know Trump or DeSantis will support because that's who's helping them put him in office. You could say the same thing about Trump. No politician is coming to save you. The only thing that's going to come and save you is if you think for yourself. That's all that's going to happen. That's all that's going to save you. So I don't want to go through this whole thing because I would just challenge you to watch it. It's really good. There are things that I don't agree with that Milo says. There are things that I do. But the fact that he completely dominated this episode on a show that that Tim is renowned for not letting others speak is an illustration, an allegory for what he claims that Trump has over DeSantis. It is a illustration in real time because that's what Milo has over Tim. It's what Milo has over Luke. It's what Milo has Tim and Luke together. And then Ian too, right? And Milo took all of the slings and arrows, saying some stupid things, some outlandish things that enabled Tim to even be on the platform doing what he's doing. And if Milo wouldn't have gotten banned, there's a case to be made that Tim wouldn't be as big as he is. Right? If Milo would have held on to that portion of the conversation. And I think that's what we're seeing a little bit now with Trump, is that Trump was kicked off of Twitter and the DeSantis crew, some who are being paid, some are being influenced, some are being, advised, some who are true believers, all of that, have taken over the space that Trump used to win the 2016 election, and he's not allowed to be there. Let us never forget that until he's back there. And he has his own company that if he were to get back there, he'd be hurting his own company. So he's kind of boxed himself in because nothing's going to replace Twitter. But I will tell you this. If they see that they can't control Twitter enough, they will get rid of it. It will go bankrupt. If they see that they can't properly control who gets what bandwidth in that area, it will cease to exist. And as bad as Twitter can be, it is the mechanism that was used to subvert the forward momentum of a regime that does not have your best interest at heart. And that was through Trump in 2015, 2016. And that's a fact. And now I use the example of the Tower of Babel. I don't use it in the sense of censorship. I use it in the sense of segregation. What was a unified square of speech in 2015 and the years leading up to it in Twitter has now been bifurcated into Gab and Truth and Parler and Getter and all these other things. If you want to use the Tower of Babel illustration, what it is that they made people speak different languages. Yes, but that segregated them into different groups. Well, you take that allegory into account when it comes to social media, and you just, okay, well, now you're all in Truth, and you're all on Twitter, and you all are all on Getter, and you're on Parler, and you're on Facebook, and you're on this, and you're on that. Now nobody sees the same message. If you're on Truth and you're on Twitter, it's two completely different worlds. People are not speaking the same language. And Trump not being on Twitter, it is very really moved to a dominant narrative that Twitter is the DeSantis platform, which has more people than Truth. Truth is the Trump platform, obviously, because he owns it. Getter, even now that Kanye owns, or Ye owns Parler, now there's indications that Black Twitter is moving towards Parler. And it's like, yeah, I dislike echo chambers too. That's why I would say, okay, combine the platforms and everybody speak to the thing and argue it out without an algorithm or a set of echo chamber hierarchy, which is what I'm experiencing right now on Twitter, is that there is now a hierarchy that is, because I spoke out against the sacred cows in my own echo chamber, have distanced themselves from me because now I'm tone policed into, well, this person he's criticized his own people. Yet there are people within my own echo chamber that are now touting their ability to criticize their own, but just with a nice enough sheen to it, or because they've been accepted and they're the people that are okay to disagree with people because the tone is okay. It's what they did to James Lindsay for over and over and over and over again. He was ran out on a rail by the same people as not being able to, as being too harsh with those on his own side sometimes who were spouting off some nonsense for which he knew more about the subject than they did. But, and they were actively taking from him his points and his stuff and reattributing it and reshaping it to go towards an end that doesn't necessarily fix the problem, or to support candidates who were designed to save you when they're not there to save you. They're just there to use the message to put themselves back in power or keep themselves in power. It's like, I never trust the person that everybody gives the free reign to criticize other people, but knocks other people down for the same criticisms because they don't like the tone of what they're saying. It's like, and what determines the tone? The simple fact that they say their tone is bad. And enough people say that over and over again, then it becomes reality. That's postmodernism. That's narrative protection. And so I'm just at the point where it's like, I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to say what I think. If you don't like it, try to destroy me. You've already done it. Try. But I'm not going to shut up. And I'm not going to kowtow. Again, when it comes to Trump, DeSantis, I'm undecided. I tend to lean more DeSantis for the practical reasons. But the minute you start trying to manipulate me into going for DeSantis is the minute I'm going to start questioning DeSantis. Let him win on a merits. Let him stand up with Trump on stage and let him battle it out. The minute I start seeing a chorus of people who I have been intimately involved with at times, preaching the same message in unison, but claiming to be free thinkers, but knocking down anybody who criticizes them from their own side. Yeah, if you Christian Cernovich, he'll block you. The same thing with Rufo, the same thing with Ruben, the same thing with, these are all guys I like, especially when it comes to Rufo, I've worked with for a long time behind the scenes. I have a whole giant list of DMs that proves it, going back years. Who've made their whole career on social media by going right after, in the teeth, the people they disagree with, but when it happens to them, against their message, against their ideas. But if you say something that undermines the narrative that makes a good point, they will knock you down and they will just tell everybody to ignore you. They'll say things about you behind your back and then provoke you into responding in public and then call you insane. That's their whole grift. And I like Sabotage. I like Rufo. I like what they've done. I've liked what they've done. But it's like, get over yourself if you can't be questioned. And you call me thin-skinned, or you call other people thin-skinned, or you call it, it's like, because I stand up to you and I've dared to, oh my gosh, show a conversation that proves that I'm not above or below their pay grade. Because that's their whole grift, is that if they don't engage with you, people don't view you as being legitimate. And so they play off of the being sitting atop, they play themselves off as being the establishment of their echo chamber. That's what they do. And then they choose people they'd rather spar with from behind the scenes to be the independent voice. So that they pick those people. Yeah, it's just like, guys. Now you have the right to see who you want to see. You have the right not to be trolled, and I've blocked people too, okay? You have the right not to have people on your own timeline run your name through the mud with stuff that isn't true. And when you've been somebody like Candace or even these other people, Sabotage, who's been actively attacked, I understand it. But when you're talking about dealing with your own friends, people you've known for years, and you block them because they bring up a point that undermines your narrative, that undermines your political narrative for which you're working with, in a non-threatening way, but ask questions you aren't prepared to answer, there's a difference. There's a difference. And will actively try to diminish your followership because they know people trust them, so they placate and they play off of their status and their influence to knock down people that disagree with them on the merits of their arguments, as opposed to knocking down people who attack people and attack them personally. They will actively engage in attacking you personally from behind the scenes using flying monkeys. It happens over and over again. And they made their name off of fighting that type of manipulation. That to me makes you worse. That to me makes you got left Hegelians, you got right Hegelians. And they will exert influence over people who are making money in this space, or desire to make money in this space, or who want to make a name for themselves, even if it's in their own local community or whatever it is, because they like the clicks. And they'll connect them with the biggest accounts, and they'll be able to throw out stories that they're doing, and sometimes manufactured, sometimes not, sometimes blown up beyond what they usually are, or even in concert with the people they claim to oppose. And so they can dominate their own echo chamber or their own community's, and their own community's audience by diminishing people that they know think for themselves and won't toe the line. It is gaslighting. It's wokeism 101. And I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of the talking points you hear from people that have been the most successful at defining wokeism came from me, came from people I've worked with. I was at the ground floor of that. I've connected with it. I can source it. And I know the manipulation. And I just challenge anybody who may be watching me. Agree with me, like me, don't, whatever. I want to see, I challenge you to go after the truth at all possible. When you don't tell the truth and you may have made a mistake, fix it. If you can't fix it, do it as soon as you can. We all make mistakes. I've made mistakes. I've done retractions, and I've been attacked by people on my own side. for correcting my mistakes. And they've used it to make it seem like I'm trying to hurt people that I'm actually voting for or that I've actually supported in the past. Because they want my audience, and I've seen this done to many other people. And they'll actively throw you down and make you seem unpalatable by bringing up stuff that doesn't matter to your arguments because they want the audience, or they want to make sure they have the audience when the next big fight comes up. Because they cannot stomach somebody who thinks freely and will question them. That's wokeism 101. It's narrative protection. It's marketing. It's preemptive narrative. And I don't claim to be right every time. I know I've been wrong. I try to correct it when I've been wrong. Just watch for anybody who is constantly in a battle, because I was going this list that came out with libs of TikTok at the top of it, made by this guy from Germany. Basically was logging all the accounts that are the worst against leftism on Twitter. Libs of TikTok's number 1, right? And you've got some of the bigger accounts, Gays Against Groomers. I'm number 469 out of 41,000. I've earned my credibility in this area over years and constant battle with the left. And I'll tell you, seeing people who get engaged with the left and are always doing it throws up my spidey senses, because it's like I've spent years and in the trenches on this stuff, and the left will largely ignore you unless you're a larger influencer, unless there's a narrative to be manufactured. And then you start seeing people get engaged with people on the left on an outsized influence without really doing any damage to them, but giving them fodder to make them look like they're warriors, when they really have nothing to say, but they're just parroting the establishment points. And then you see all kinds of establishment people flocking to them to throw them up. And it's like, and I'm not talking about anybody specific. I'm talking about things that I've seen over the course of 2 years. That is a prime indication to me, because make no mistake, there is establishment on both sides that are working together to put up narratives towards a combined goal. If you want to call it uniparty, you want to call it rhinos versus, establishment Democrats or whatever it may be. They get their power by making people fight over stuff that doesn't matter, while they influence things behind the scenes and protect the apparatuses that are actually doing the harm. And so it's like a magician. You have a bright, shiny thing over here, right? Look at this over here, guys. While they just implant it and embed it over here. And it gets deeper and deeper, deeper before you realize what's going on. And by the time you realize what's going on, the trick has been done. It's over. And you've already lost. When you thought over here you were winning. That's what happened with these midterms. Is the establishment Republican Party was pulling support, just like Milo had said. They were pulling support from all the candidates that were too aligned with Trump and too thought like him, and propping up others. Trump shouts off his mouth right before the election. Now it's like the whole narrative is shifted. It's Trump has lost this, and his message is so unpopular that you can't go with him in the general election. And that makes me nervous. That's all. I think DeSantis has got to be his own guy. I lean towards him. I think he's articulate. I think he's smart. But if you're worried about the swamp, they both have swamp problems. I think somebody in the chat had said that. But at least one of the candidates, and I'm going to make a point for each side, one of the candidates, Trump, knows now, because he spent 4 years in the office, what he needs to actually get rid of if he goes back in to be successful. DeSantis doesn't. And the presidency will smack him. It's a bigger job than anybody can ever imagine. No, DeSantis hasn't made, he's playing rope-a-dope. DeSantis hasn't made a statement. And he's having all these people do it for him. And they're doing it in concert. They're doing it in unison. They're doing it in the same rhythm, in the same tone. And that always makes me nervous because the last time I saw that in earnest was COVID. And we all must remember that Trump was acting in real time and was doing everything he could to reopen the economy because when all that happened was that the economy was the best it had ever been. And they knew if the economy stayed that way, that he would win re-election. And I'm not saying COVID was manufactured. It was real, all that stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that COVID, that he was responding, trying to get the vaccines out and all of that to try to open up the economy. That's what he was doing. And it's always easy to play, well, he shut things down. He did all this. And yeah, and those are things he needs to answer for. But I would like to see him and DeSantis on stage earlier rather than later, than this whole narrative being set by other people for DeSantis who've been shown on Twitter to be working with the DeSantis campaign to push a narrative. They've been shown that on Twitter. They threw it out there, and some other people on the left had shown it. They're communicating and putting out these narratives. And that's not abnormal. I'm not saying that they're evil or whatever. I'm just saying that they're already working with the DeSantis campaign. Let the two candidates talk. But they're giving DeSantis this kind of above the fray mentality when he's been actively working behind the scenes to goad Trump into saying something in public. Now, Trump needs to stop falling for it and needs to, just like Milo said, get his mojo back if he's going to come up against DeSantis. But DeSantis needs to quit acting like he's above the fray when he's made his brand as well on the Trump kind of style of going right after it. And quit saying that DeSantis is some kind of victim because Trump called him a name. That's what I can't stand either. And Trump needs to quit playing the victim. It's like, just go after each other, guys. Just go after each other. Go after each other. Don't send your flying monkeys to go after each other. You two get out there and do it. And I think Trump was trying to do that, to goad DeSantis out of the closet, and he just kind of fell into it. And DeSantis, and I've seen it over and over again, and this is a sound political, is if Trump, the more Trump says, right? And the more people that are being, the influencers that go out there and start parroting the point of Trump is not, is being childish or is, just doing the exact same thing that people not vote for him in 2020, or the more conservative people that were defending him that flip sides, the more legitimacy DeSantis has. And so DeSantis at this point is playing the smart play. And it's like, and they've goaded him into some narrative traps. And the whole vaccine issue is a narrative trap. Because there are people out there who say, and for YouTube, I'm just quoted, there are people out there who say that it's not effective. And then the people that they're saying Trump can't win in the general election, just get this, are the ones who believe that it is. So they've pinned him against his base and against the people that they say he can't win. Do you see that? Because he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. And I'm not making a statement on whether it is or isn't because I can't, because this is YouTube and I'll get kicked off. But what I'm saying is I'm undergirding the narrative trap here, is that there are people who say it's not, people who say that it is. And the people who say that it is are the people that they say Trump can't win to win a general election. But the people who say it's not, if he disagrees with those, then he loses his base. It's a no-win situation. And they're saying DeSantis wins the people in the middle and has less of a chance of getting the Trump base. So it's a narrative trap. And this is why I think Trump, regardless of what it does for his own platform on truth, needs to get back on Twitter if they will let him on. But I guarantee you, this is my prediction. If Trump were to do that, you would see Twitter cease to exist in about 2 weeks. because they won't allow, because if he does that, everybody flocks back to Twitter. And then you see people pulling more ads and stuff like that. And they can't stomach that kind of unified public square. Because with that comes the ability to move the message. That's what they learned in 2015. And they're not going to make the same mistake twice. That's why they were brazen enough to kick Trump off the platform in the first place, knowing that he would try to build something else. Then it would keep in his vested interest not to go to the platform that is his competitor. They're using his tendencies against him. They spent years studying him. And right now they're beating him with it. They are. So it's just something to think about. I'm not sold on either one right now. I've had my problems with Trump. I like DeSantis. I've had my problems with him. I think that I just don't like being manipulated. That's what it comes down to. And that's why it's refreshing to see someone like Milo come up and lay it down after 5 years. And dominate the area that he built or helped build, and that he was censored from because of that. In a position I've been in, I've sat in the exact same chair that Milo is sitting in and had that conversation with these guys, and they're great. They're smart. They know lots about a lot of different things. But man, Milo's got that presence, the same presence that he illustrates and talks about with Trump. And this is it's an allegory for it. So if you all appreciate what I'm doing, like, subscribe, hit the bell, share the video. That would be appreciated. Super thanks, super chats, all those kinds of things. I'm just going to be who I am. And I'm just going to talk to you guys from here on out about those kinds of things. And this is just fun for me. So thanks for watching. Gotta go do some things. So I'll be on later tomorrow, those kinds of things. But like, subscribe. Thanks for your support. UnWokable, follows, all those things. See you guys later.